The Diving Bell and the Butterfly by Jean-Dominique Bowery. The author suffered a massive stroke at the age of 43 and was diagnosed with locked-in syndrome. He managed, through blinking his left eye only, to dictate this book, and he died 2 days after it was published. This is not a new book, it's from 1997, but I wanted to share some of it. I don't know if I can manage to read the whole book, but I would like to bring people's attention to this tremendously sad, tremendously inspirational memoir. Like I said, not a new book, but it's haunting. It's translated from the French, and I'm going to see how far I can get to it. I don't know if I can read the whole thing, but we'll see how this goes. Prologue. Through the frayed curtain at my window, a wan glow announces the break of day. My heels hurt, my head weighs a ton, and something like a giant invisible diving bell holds my whole body prisoner. My room emerges slowly from the gloom. I linger over every item. Photos of loved ones, my children's drawings, posters, the little tin cyclist sent by a friend the day before the Paris-Roubaix bike race, and the IV pole hanging over the bed where I have been confined these past 6 months, like a hermit crab dug into his rocks. No need to wonder very long where I am, or to recall that the life I once knew was snuffed out Friday, the 8th of December, last year. Up until then, I had never even heard of the brainstem. I've since learned that it is an essential component of our internal computer, the inseparable link between the brain and the spinal cord. I was brutally introduced to this vital piece of anatomy when a cerebrovascular accident took my brainstem out of action. In the past, it was known as a massive stroke, and you simply died. But improved resuscitation techniques have now prolonged and refined the agony. You survive, but you survive with what is so aptly known as locked-in syndrome. Paralyzed from head to toe, the patient, his mind intact, is imprisoned inside his own body, unable to speak or move. In my case, blinking my left eyelid is my only means of communication. Of course, the party chiefly concerned is the last to hear the good news. I myself had 20 days of deep coma and several weeks of grogginess and somnolence before I truly appreciated the extent of the damage. I did not fully awake until the end of January. When I finally surfaced, I was in room 119 of the Naval Hospital at Berck-sur-Mer on the French Channel coast. The same room 119, infused now with the first light of day, from which I write. An ordinary day. At 7, the chapel bells begin again to punctuate the passage of time, quarter hour by quarter hour. After their night's respite, my congested bronchial tubes once more begin their noisy rattle. My hands, lying curled on the yellow sheets, are hurting, although I can't tell if they are burning hot or ice cold. To fight off stiffness, I instinctively stretch, my arms and legs moving only a fraction of an inch. It is often enough to bring relief to a painful limb. My diving bell becomes less oppressive, and my mind takes flight like a butterfly. There is so much to do. You can wander off in space or in time. Sit out for Tierra del Fuego or for King Midas's court. You can visit the woman you love. Slide down beside her and stroke her still sleeping face. You can build castles in Spain, steal the Golden Fleece. Discover Atlantis. Realize your childhood dreams and adult ambitions. Enough rambling. My main task now is to compose the first of these bedridden travel notes, so that I shall be ready when my publisher's emissary arrives to take my dictation, letter by letter. In my head, I churn over each sentence 10 times, delete a word, add an adjective, and learn my text by heart, paragraph by paragraph. 7:30. The duty nurse interrupts the flow of my thoughts. Following a well-established ritual, she draws the curtain, checks tracheostomy and drip feed, and turns on the TV, so I can watch the news. Right now, a cartoon celebrates the adventures of the fastest frog in the West. And what if I asked to be changed into a frog? What then? The wheelchair. I had never seen so many coats in my little room. Nurses, orderlies, physical therapists, occupational therapists, psychologists, neurologists, interns, and even the department head. The whole hospital had turned out for the event. When they first burst in, pushing the conveyance ahead of them, I thought it meant that I was being ejected to make room for a new patient. I had already been at Burke a few weeks, and was daily drawing nearer to the shores of awareness. But I could still not imagine any connection between a wheelchair and me. No one had yet given me an accurate picture of my situation, and I clung to the certainty, based on bits and pieces I had overheard, that I would very quickly recover movement and speech. Indeed, my roving mind was busy with 1,000 projects: a novel, travel, a play, marketing a fruit cocktail of my own invention. Don't ask for the recipe, I've forgotten it. They immediately dressed me. Good for the morale, pronounced the neurologist in sententious tones. And in truth, I would have been pleased to trade my yellow nylon hospital gown for a plaid shirt, old pants, and a shapeless sweater, except that it was a nightmare to put them on. Or rather, to watch the clothes, manipulated after endless contortions over these uncooperative deadweight limbs, which served me only as a source of pain. When I was finally dressed, the ritual could begin. 2 attendants seized me by the shoulders and feet, lifted me off the bed, and dumped me unceremoniously into the wheelchair. I had graduated from being a patient whose prognosis was uncertain to an official quadriplegic. They didn't quite applaud, but they came close. My caretakers made me travel the length and breadth of the hospital floor to make certain that the seated position did not trigger uncontrollable spasms. But I was too devastated by this brutal downgrading of my future hopes to take much notice. They had to place a special cushion behind my head. It was wobbling about like the head of one of those African women upon removal of the stack of rings that has been stretching her neck for years. "You can handle the wheelchair," said the occupational therapist, with a smile intended to make the remark sound like good news. Whereas to my ears, it had the ring of a life sentence. In one flash, I saw the frightening truth. It was as blinding as an atomic explosion and keener than a guillotine blade. They all left. As 3 orderlies laid me back down, I thought of the movie gangsters struggling to fit the slain informer's body into the trunk of their car. The wheelchair sat abandoned in a corner, with my clothes tossed over its dark blue plastic backrest. Before the last white coat left the room, I signaled my wish to have the TV turned down low. On the screen, my father's favorite quiz show. Since daybreak, an unremitting drizzle had been streaking my windows. Prayer. Oddly enough, the shock of the wheelchair was helpful. Things became clearer. I gave up my grandiose plans, and the friends who had built a barrier of affection around me since my catastrophe were able to talk freely. With the subject no longer taboo, we began to discuss locked-in syndrome. First of all, it is very rare. It is small consolation. But the chances of being caught in this hellish trap are about as likely as those of winning the lottery. At Burke, only 2 of us were locked in, and my own case was not classic. I am able to swivel my head, which is not supposed to be part of the clinical picture. Since most victims are relegated to a vegetable existence, the evolution of the disease is not well understood. All that is known is that if the nervous system makes up its mind to start working again, it does so at the speed of the hair growing from the base of the brain. So it is likely that several years will go by before I can expect to wiggle my toes. In fact, it is in my respiratory passages that I can hope for improvement. In the long term, I can hope to eat more normally, that is, without the help of a gastric tube. Eventually, perhaps, I will be able to breathe naturally without a respirator and muster enough breath to make my vocal cords vibrate. But for now, I would be the happiest of men if I could just swallow the overflow of saliva that endlessly floods my mouth. Even before first light, I'm already practicing sliding my tongue toward the rear of my palate in order to provoke a swallowing reaction. What is more, I have dedicated to my larynx the little packets of incense hanging on the wall, amulets brought back from Japan by pious globe-trotting friends. Just one of the stones in the Thanksgiving monument erected by my circle of friends during their wanderings. In every corner of the world, the most diverse deities have been solicited in my name. I try to organize all this spiritual energy. If they tell me that candles have been burned for my sake in a Breton chapel, or that a mantra has been chanted by a Nepalese temple, I at once give each of the spirits invoked a precise task. A woman I know enlisted a Cameroon holy man to procure me the goodwill of Africa's gods. I have assigned him my right eye. For my hearing problems, I rely on the relationship between my devout mother-in-law and the monks of a Bordeaux brotherhood. They regularly dedicate their prayers to me, and I occasionally steal into their abbey to hear their chants fly heavenward. And so far the results have been unremarkable. But when 7 brothers of the same order had their throats cut by Islamic fanatics, my ears hurt for several days. Yet all these lofty protections are merely clay ramparts, walls of sand, Maginot Lines, compared to the small prayer my daughter Celeste sends up to her Lord every morning, every evening before she closes her eyes. Since we fall asleep at roughly the same hour, I set out for the kingdom of slumber with this wonderful talisman which shields me from all harm. Bath time. At 8:30, the physical therapist arrives. Brigitte, the woman with an athletic figure and an imperial Roman profile, has come to exercise my stiffened arms and legs. They call this exercise mobilization, a term whose martial connotations contrast ludicrously with the paltry forces thus summoned. For I've lost 66 pounds in just 20 weeks. When I began a diet a week before my stroke, I never dreamed of such a dramatic result. As she works, Brigitte checks for the smallest flicker of improvement. "Try to squeeze my hand," she asks. Since I sometimes have the illusion that I am moving my fingers, I focus my energy on crushing her knuckles, but nothing stirs, and she replaces my inert hand on its foam pad. In fact, the only sign of change is in my neck. I can now turn my head 90 degrees, and my field of vision extends from the slate roof of the building next door to the curious tunnel-walling Mickey Mouse drawn by my son, Theophile, when I was still unable to open my mouth. Now, after regular exercise, we have reached the stage of slipping a lollipop into it. As the neurologist says, we need to be very patient. The session with Brigitte ends with a facial massage. Her warm fingers travel all over my face, including the numb zone, which seems to have the texture of parchment, and the area that still has feeling, where I can manage the beginnings of a frown. Since the demarcation line runs across my mouth, I can only half smile, which fairly faithfully reflects my ups and downs. A domestic event as commonplace as washing can trigger the most varied emotions. One day, for example, I find it amusing, in my 45th year, to be cleaned up and turned over, to have my bottom wiped and swaddled like a newborn's. I even derive a guilty pleasure from this total lapse into infancy. But the next day, the same procedure seems to me unbearably sad, and a tear rolls down through the lather a nurse's aid spreads over my cheeks. And my weekly bath plunges me simultaneously into distress and happiness. The delectable moment when I sink into the tub is quickly followed by the nostalgia for the protracted immersions that were the joy of my previous life. Armed with a cup of tea or a scotch, a good book, or a pile of newspapers, I would soak for hours, maneuvering the taps with my toes. Rarely do I feel my condition so cruelly as when I am recalling such pleasures. Luckily, I have no time for gloomy thoughts. Already they are wheeling me back, shivering, to my room, on a gurney as comfortable as a bed of nails. I must be fully dressed by 10:30 and ready to go to the rehabilitation center. Having turned down the hideous jogging suit provided by the hospital, I am now attired as I was in my student days. Like the bath, my old clothes could easily bring back poignant, painful memories, but I see in the clothing a symbol of continuing life, and proof that I still want to be myself, If I must drool, I may as well drool on cashmere. I'm up to page 17. This is part 1 of The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. I will continue this and hopefully finish it soon. Thank you for listening.